hope, love, pride. Presented by Waymo.
Well, 35 years ago, a small group of activists in the Bay Area got together and created a protest tapestry.
So today, the AIDS Quilt is the largest community folk art project in the world. It stands as a stunning memorial to people who have died from the disease.
KPIX5's Reed Cowan is live in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, where the Bay Area can see the largest display of the quilt ever this weekend. Reed.
And really, when you look at the enormity of these panels that are going to be laid out here at Golden Gate Park, you really feel humbled and you get a sense of the loss. Let's go over and look at the grids that have been laid out to sort of create a footprint for where all of the quilts will go. 3,000 of 50,000 that exist in the world today will be laid out here. And when you really look at the space that will take up, just 3,000, it's humbling to realize that each quilt represents somebody out there in the world who lived, was a real human being with real hopes and dreams, and whose life was cut short by this horrible disease. You know, as we look at what will be a history-making display for the first time in several years, so many quilts out in one place, we are mindful of the fact that there were original quilters and original people who stepped forward to make this happen. And tonight, our Elizabeth Cook introduces you to one of the original handmaidens and guardians of the quilt.
Inside this East Bay warehouse, to the beat of disco and the clank of a sewing machine, Gert McMullin is hard at work.
I edge them, grommet them, and I make sure that they get photographed. I loved the quilt, and I loved my friends.
In her hands, another name. Another story added to a national treasure, the AIDS Quilt. Each panel handled with the utmost care and respect.
This is such a labor of love. Why do you do it?
I do it because all my friends are dead.
In the 80s, half the gay men in San Francisco were infected with HIV. Most died. In 1987, Gert heard about a project, a protest of sorts, dreamed up by AIDS activist Cleve Jones.
It was a bunch of pissed off people going to D.C. We had no idea what we were doing.
But they had this, a quilt of panels woven with the names of those who had died from AIDS. They wanted to unfurl it in front of the White House, each panel 3 by 6 feet, the size of a grave.
The reason for that was we were laying down our dead in front of the government so to embarrass them to do something, and that's all it was for. I thought we'd go there and save the world, and that would be that.
But instead of a single act of protest, the quilt took on a life of its own. The public response was overwhelming.
They were clamoring for it, so we decided we'd do a tour.
Hold on.
In San Francisco, the quilt was packed up and brought by truck on a journey across America. 20 stops, including these in St. Louis and Houston. Everywhere, families, friends, and lovers made quilt panels to honor and celebrate their loved ones and donated them to the project.
So you are able to figure out exactly which quilt belongs to who based on the numbers?
Oh, yeah. So this will go into the database.
The entire AIDS quilt is now stored in San Leandro. The project contains more than 50,000 panels dedicated to more than 100,000 people who died from AIDS. It weighs more than 54 tons. Each panel is personally marked by Gert with a special identifying number. She gets at least one a week, as well as visitors.
It's an intimate experience, I think, when you see it for the first time, especially if you know somebody.
You know, our country, people don't want to talk about death and all that and grief, and we welcome it here, and I'm not afraid of people crying. You want to cry, but a lot of people want to stop you from crying. Okay, well, go ahead, I'm here if you need me.
Finally,
and then this is the last one that was given to us in 1987.
Apart from the quilt, a single panel, known as the last one. Gert has been holding on to it for 35 years, waiting for the last infection, the last death.
We want to be shut down, and that's what we want to do. We want to sew that in and be done with it. I'm hoping that before I die, I could see that went in.
Elizabeth Cook, KPIX5.
And our thanks to producer Molly, who not only has a deep knowledge of the quilt and its history, but also a deep heart for that. We wanted to make sure and acknowledge her as well, because when you come to a space like this, that phrase that we always hear, every life matters, really, really lands here. We have the great honor to talk to Admiral Levine with the Department of Health and Human Services. Welcome to the West. You were there at the beginning. You want to be here to mark the end as well. What do you mean by that, Admiral?
Well, that's exactly right. So I started my pediatric residency program at Mount Sinai in New York City in 1983, right around the beginning of the AIDS crisis. And so in pediatrics, I saw young babies, infants with opportunistic infections and had HIV, AIDS, and they all died. And their mothers who had been infected, they all died. And then later on, I saw more teenagers who had developed HIV from many different mechanisms, and tragically, they all died, and there was nothing we could do. We have made so much progress medically, but we still have work to do to get those medicines to people who need them most. So I was there at the beginning of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the early 80s. I want to be there at the end during my time at HHS.
And you know, KPIX is the legacy station for covering this story here in the Bay Area, and we want to let you know we want to be there to cover that last day as well and see that last panel put out. It's the message for young people who are, you know, starting to understand their own bodies, their own health needs and health protections. This is our world.
This is still happening in our world, and we need young people to know that. So they need to take precautions, and we have so much to offer. For people who are at risk of contracting HIV, we have PrEP. For patients who have HIV, we have medicines. Detectable can be untransmittable. We have made so much medical progress, but we still have to get that message out to the people who need it most.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Just one of many big names who will be out here this weekend. A really important weekend. If you don't know much about it, bring your family out here and get educated. I'm humbled every time I see a section of the quilt, and especially when you see this large expanse. I'm going to step off the camera because this is the image I want to leave you with. Just how many names? 3,000 names will be laid out here. Think about it. There are 50,000 names that won't be here tomorrow. And it's something everybody should see and really take in. Back to you.